The sun in the medieval world did not rise with urgency. It crept, slowly and without announcement, over the uneven roofs of timber houses, over stone walls damp with night mist, and into the narrow streets where straw and mud lay pressed flat by countless feet. In one such street, just wide enough for a cart to pass, a medieval doctor began his day long before most people noticed the light at all. He did not wake to an alarm, nor to a clock chiming the hour, because clocks were rare and precious things. Instead, he woke when the city itself shifted, when a distant rooster called, when the air grew slightly warmer, when the candle he had burned through the night finally guttered and smoked itself into darkness. He rose from a bed that was more wooden bench than mattress, wrapped himself in a woolen robe that smelled faintly of herbs and smoke, and sat for a long moment in stillness, listening. Medieval doctors spent much of their lives listening to the city, to the countryside, to the bodies of others, and to the long inheritance of ancient words passed down through books copied by hand. Before he ever touched a patient, the doctor listened to the silence of early morning, because silence told him what kind of day it would be. He washed his hands in a basin of cold water, not because he understood germs, but because cleanliness was associated with order, balance, and reason. The water shocked him awake. He dried his hands on linen that had been mended so many times it resembled a map of stitched paths. Then he turned to the shelf beside his bed, where his tools waited patiently. They were not many. A few small knives, sharpened carefully the night before, a spoon made of horn, a small scale for weighing powders, a leather pouch filled with dried plants, fennel, sage, yarrow, mint, and above all, books. Thick, heavy volumes copied in Latin, sometimes in Arabic, sometimes translated clumsily into the local tongue. These books were his compass, his authority, and his comfort. Before breakfast, the doctor read. He read not to discover something new, but to remind himself of what was already believed. He reread passages from Galen and Hippocrates, whose words had crossed centuries like travelers who never aged. He reviewed the four humors blood phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, because everything he would do that day would revolve around balance among them. If a patient felt cold, the doctor would think of excess phlegm. If a patient burned with fever, yellow bile might be blamed. If sadness lingered too long, black bile whispered its presence. Blood, warm and lively, could be both a gift and a curse. Only once his mind felt properly aligned with these ideas did he eat. Breakfast was simple, coarse bread, perhaps softened with warm ale, sometimes cheese if fortune allowed. He ate slowly. Medieval doctors believed digestion was an act of transformation, not speed. Rushing a meal meant rushing the body into confusion. As the city fully woke, the doctor stepped outside. The street greeted him with familiar sounds, hooves on stone, vendors calling softly, the hum of ordinary life beginning its daily rhythm. Some days, patients came to him. Other days, he went to them. Today, he carried his bag and prepared to walk. His first visit might be to a merchant whose joints ached each morning. The doctor would enter a dim house where sunlight struggled through oiled cloth windows. He would greet the household, ask about sleep, appetite, dreams. Dreams mattered deeply. A dream of fire could suggest excess heat in the body. A dream of drowning might hint at too much moisture. He examined urine carefully, holding the glass vial up to the light, swirling it gently. Color, clarity, sediment, all spoke volumes. Urine was one of the medieval doctor's most trusted messengers. He might sniff it, not in disgust, but in concentration. Smell carried meaning. He felt the pulse, not counting beats as we do now, but assessing strength, rhythm, and character. Was it bounding? Weak? Erratic? He pressed fingers to the wrist and closed his eyes, listening through touch. Advice followed, rarely dramatic, often slow. Eat warming foods, he might say. Avoid damp air. Walk after meals. Sleep with your head elevated. Medicine was as much instruction as intervention. If balance seemed seriously disturbed, stronger measures came. Bloodletting might be prescribed. The doctor would choose the vein carefully, sometimes consulting astrological charts to determine the most favorable day and hour. The heavens mattered. Planets influenced organs. The moon pulled fluids within the body as surely as it pulled the sea. Bloodletting was done calmly, methodically. A bowl placed beneath the arm, a swift incision. Watching the color change from dark to brighter red told the doctor when enough had flowed. Too much would weaken, too little would be useless. Balance was everything. Between patients, the doctor walked. Walking gave him time to think, to recall passages from books, to observe weather changes. A sudden wind might mean more coughs later. Rain meant fevers and chills. The environment was never separate from health. Sometimes he visited the poor, people who paid with bread, with labor, with gratitude. Sometimes he visited the wealthy, whose houses smelled of spices, and whose illnesses were often no less confusing. Wealth did not protect against imbalance. At midday, the doctor rested. Not because he was tired, but because rest was part of proper living. He might sit near a monastery wall, eating quietly, watching shadows move. He avoided heavy meals at noon, preferring moderation. Too much food dulled the mind. In the afternoon, he prepared remedies. Grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle, mixing powders with honey or wine, warming ointments over small fires. Each movement was slow, practiced, almost meditative. Medicine was not rushed. Rushing led to error, and error displeased both God and nature. He labeled mixtures carefully, sometimes with symbols rather than words. Literacy varied, memory mattered. So did repetition. Late afternoon brought new patients, a child with a cough, a woman exhausted from childbirth weeks earlier, an old man whose breath rattled like dry leaves. The doctor listened more than he spoke. Listening was half the cure. As evening approached, he returned home. He washed again, changed clothes, aired his herbs. He wrote notes if he could, short observations, copied onto reused parchment, writing preserved thought. Dinner was light, perhaps soup, perhaps bread dipped in broth. Heavy meals at night were discouraged. Sleep needed a calm body. Before bed, the doctor read again. Not to learn, but to reassure himself that he had followed tradition correctly. Innovation was dangerous, authority lay in the past. Finally, candles were extinguished. The city quieted. Somewhere bells rang the hour, approximate imperfect. The doctor lay down, hands folded, thinking briefly of the humors, the patients, the weather. He trusted that balance, if not achieved today, might come tomorrow. And as sleep claimed him, the medieval world continued its slow turning. Bodies seeking harmony, doctors walking narrow streets, knowledge passing gently from one day to the next, unhurried, repetitive, and endlessly human. The night deepened, and with it the quiet certainty that tomorrow would arrive much the same as today. In the medieval world, days were not chased. They were received. When the doctor slept, he did so knowing that his work was never finished, only paused, like a breath held gently before release. He woke again before dawn, not because he wished to, but because the body itself kept time. The room was cool, the stone walls holding the night like a memory. He lay still for a while, listening to his own breathing, measuring its steadiness. Doctors believed that to understand others, one must first understand oneself, and so he paid attention to his pulse, to the way his chest rose and fell, to the faint stiffness in his fingers that came with age. When he rose, he followed the same rituals as always. The same basin, the same cold water, the same careful movements. Consistency was a form of medicine in itself. Disorder invited illness. Routine invited balance. Outside, fog lay low, softening the edges of buildings and muting sound. The doctor liked mornings like this. Fog suggested moisture in the air, and moisture meant certain kinds of sickness would be more common. He adjusted his expectations for the day accordingly. Perhaps more chest complaints, perhaps sluggish digestion. He mentally reviewed warming remedies. A knock came at his door earlier than usual. A messenger stood there, wrapped in a cloak, breath visible. A noble woman was unwell. Fever through the night. Confusion. Fear. The doctor nodded slowly, neither alarmed nor dismissive. Fever was a language the body spoke when something was out of place. He gathered his bag and followed the messenger through streets still half asleep. Dogs watched from doorways. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys. In the noblewoman's chamber, heavy curtains trapped heat and scent. The doctor frowned gently. Too much warmth could worsen fever. He asked for the windows to be opened slightly. Fresh air was not feared. Stagnation was. He examined her as he always did. He asked about dreams. About thirst. About the color of her urine. He touched her wrist, then her forehead. He listened to her breathing. He did not rush. Panic belonged to those who did not understand time. He prescribed rest, barley water, cooling foods. Perhaps a mild purge if the heat did not break. No bloodletting yet. Not every fever demanded steel. The body sometimes corrected itself if given space. As he left, payment was discussed quietly. Coins changed hands, but so did expectations. The doctor would return. Healing was not instant, it unfolded. The rest of the morning passed in familiar motion. A farmer with a swollen knee. A monk with headaches from long hours bent over manuscripts. A young apprentice whose hands trembled from worry more than illness. The doctor treated each with the same calm seriousness. No ailment was too small to be heard. By midday, the sun burned away the fog. The air grew dry. The doctor adjusted again. Dryness meant different imbalances. He noted it mentally. Weather was a patient too, one that never stopped speaking. In the afternoon, he visited a hospital, not as we imagine them now, but a long hall filled with beds, prayers, and the smell of boiled herbs. Many patients lay there not to be cured, but to be cared for. Medieval medicine knew its limits. Comfort mattered. The doctor walked slowly between beds, offering advice to attendants, checking wounds, observing fevers. He believed observation was a form of action. Watching taught patience. Patience prevented harm. He spent time with a man whose leg had been injured weeks ago. The wound was healing poorly. The doctor examined it, noting redness, smell, warmth. He cleaned it gently, applied an ointment of honey and herbs. Honey was valued not only for taste, but for its preserving qualities. Though the reasons were not fully understood, experience mattered more than explanation. As evening returned, the doctor felt the familiar weight in his shoulders. Not exhaustion, exactly, but accumulation. Each day layered upon the last. He returned home, prepared remedies for tomorrow, cleaned his tools carefully. Tools reflected the practitioner. Dull knives meant careless hands. He ate quietly. He read again. He prayed, though not always for success. Often he prayed for steadiness, for the ability to accept outcomes beyond his control. When he lay down, sleep came slowly. Thoughts drifted. The noblewoman's fever, the farmer's knee, the smell of the hospital hall. Medieval doctors carried their patients with them into rest. There was no sharp line between work and life. Healing was not a profession, it was a way of existing. Days passed like this. Weeks, seasons changed. In winter, the doctor treated coughs and chills, advised against cold drafts, prescribed warming spices. In summer, he warned of excess heat, of spoiled food, of fevers that burned too brightly. Each season brought its own patterns, and the doctor learned to move with them, not against them. Sometimes he failed. A child did not recover, a wound turned black, a fever worsened. The doctor mourned quietly, but he did not abandon his beliefs. Failure did not mean ignorance, it meant limitation. Medieval medicine was built on humility before nature and God. Sometimes he succeeded. Pain eased. Strength returned. Gratitude followed. But even success was treated carefully. Pride was dangerous. Balance applied to the soul as much as the body. As years went by, the doctor aged. His hair thinned. His hands stiffened. Apprentices joined him, watching, listening, learning not just techniques but temperament. He taught them how to wait, how to observe, how to speak gently, how to accept uncertainty. What do medieval doctors do all day? One might ask centuries later. They walked. They listened. They balanced. They remembered. They repeated. They trusted old words and careful habits. They moved through time slowly, guided by the belief that health was harmony, not conquest. And as the doctor finally closed his eyes one last time, the world did not change its rhythm. Another would take his place. Another would wake before dawn, wash hands in cold water, read ancient texts, and step into narrow streets with a bag of herbs and a mind full of patience. The medieval day would begin again, unhurried, steady, and quietly alive, like a long breath drawn out into sleep, carrying with it the soft certainty that balance, though fragile, was always worth seeking. The world did not notice when one doctor's footsteps faded, because the rhythm of medieval life was never held by a single person. It flowed on like water over stone, shaped by repetition rather than interruption. Somewhere nearby, another doctor rose before dawn, feeling the same cool air on his skin, repeating the same careful motions, inheriting the same slow responsibility. Morning returned again, as it always did, with light slipping gently into rooms rather than bursting in. The doctor's house creaked softly as it warmed. Wood expanded. Stone sighed. He sat on the edge of his bed longer now, giving his body time to awaken. Age had taught him that forcing movement brought imbalance. So he waited, breathing evenly, letting stiffness dissolve at its own pace. He washed his face and hands, then lingered over the basin, watching ripples settle. Stillness after movement mattered. He dried his hands slowly, folded the cloth neatly, placed it back where it belonged. Everything had its place. Disorder in objects reflected disorder in the mind. Outside, the city breathed. A cart rattled somewhere. A bell rang, not sharply, but dully, softened by distance and fog. The doctor gathered his bag, heavier now with additions collected over years. A new herb learned from a traveling healer. A small instrument traded from a barber surgeon. A handwritten note tucked between book pages. Before stepping out, he checked the sky. Cloud cover, wind direction, the color of dawn, all were signs. He did not need certainty. He needed awareness. Medicine was the art of noticing small changes. His first patient that day was an old woman who lived alone. Her neighbors worried because she had not come out to fetch water. The doctor found her sitting quietly, wrapped in blankets, her breathing shallow but steady. He did not rush. He spoke softly, asked gentle questions, let silence do part of the work. Silence often revealed more than speech. He examined her hands, cold, dry. He asked about her appetite, gone, her sleep, broken. He suspected a slow draining of warmth, an imbalance of cold and dryness common in age. He advised warmth, broths, gentle movement if possible. He knew there was no dramatic cure. Sometimes the goal was comfort, not correction. As he left, he paused at the door, listening one last time to her breathing. Doctors learned to listen even when they were no longer touching. Sound lingered in memory. The rest of the morning unfolded in familiar ways. He treated a baker with a burn, a child with stomach pains from spoiled milk, a young woman whose fainting spells puzzled her family. For the fainting, he asked about diet, about menstrual cycles, about emotional strain. Medieval doctors did not separate mind from body. Fear, sorrow, excitement, all moved the humors. He recommended grounding foods, rest, and avoidance of excessive excitement. Balance again, always balance. By midday, the sun stood higher, warming stone and skin alike. The doctor took his meal sitting on a low wall, chewing slowly, watching dust motes dance in the light. He believed digestion required calm. Even thoughts could interfere. So he let his mind drift, focusing on the rhythm of chewing, swallowing, breathing. In the afternoon, he visited a household struck by illness. Several members had fevers. He suspected foul air miasma trapped within the house. He ordered windows opened, refuse removed, herbs burned to cleanse the space. He knew nothing of bacteria, yet he understood that environment shaped health. He examined each person in turn, noting similarities and differences. Medicine was comparison. Patterns mattered. He adjusted advice slightly for each, tailoring remedies to age, strength, temperament. No two bodies were the same, even if the illness seemed shared. As the light softened toward evening, fatigue settled into his bones. Not sharp, not overwhelming, but steady. He returned home, washed again, cleaned his tools, laid out herbs to dry. Preparation for tomorrow was part of today. Time was circular, not linear. He wrote a few lines in his notebook, the ink uneven, the parchment reused. Notes were brief. Fever, household near river. Damp air, enough to remind him later. Memory was precious but imperfect. Dinner was quiet. A thin stew, bread softened in broth. He avoided heavy foods. He avoided heavy thoughts. He believed that sleep required lightness. Before bed, he read aloud softly, letting the familiar Latin phrases wash over him. Even when he did not fully understand every word, the cadence calmed him. Knowledge lived not only in meaning, but in sound. When sleep came, it came gradually. Thoughts loosened. The day dissolved into impressions. Warmth, voices, the smell of herbs, the weight of his bag. Dreams drifted in, gentle and symbolic. A river flowing steadily, a scale balancing perfectly. He woke briefly, noted the dream, and returned to rest. Days blended into weeks. Weeks into months. The doctor marked time not by dates, but by changes in patience, in weather, in his own strength. He noticed when stairs became harder, when eyes tired sooner in candlelight. He adapted. Adaptation was survival. He trained another apprentice, then another. He repeated lessons he himself had learned long ago. Do not rush. Do not promise certainty. Observe before acting. These were not rules written in books but habits shaped by years. When plague rumors reached the city, fear followed quickly. The doctor felt it too, but he did not let it rule him. He advised cleanliness, separation when possible, prayer, moderation. He knew his power was limited. Acceptance was part of wisdom. Some nights, he lay awake listening to the city breathe, knowing that illness would return tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that, and yet he did not despair. Because his task was not to end sickness forever. His task was to meet it calmly, one patient at a time. And so medieval doctors filled their days not with miracles, but with measured steps, steady hands, patient listening, and the quiet belief that doing a little good, carefully and consistently, mattered. The world moved slowly enough to allow this. The pace of life matched the pace of healing. There were no alarms demanding urgency, no machines measuring seconds. Time stretched, forgiving and wide. As sleep deepened again, the doctor rested within that stretch of time, knowing that tomorrow would begin the same way it always had, with light entering gently, water cooling the hands, books opening patiently, and a door swinging open onto another ordinary day of care, balance, and quiet persistence. The ordinary days continued, folding into one another like layers of cloth, each similar in shape yet slightly changed by use. In the medieval world, sameness was not boredom. It was reassurance. The doctor understood this deeply. Each morning that arrived as expected felt like a small victory against chaos. He woke again before sunrise, the air cooler now, hinting that the season was shifting. Autumn moved slowly, bringing damp mornings and earlier darkness. The doctor noticed how his joints complained a little more, how patients spoke more often of heaviness and fatigue. Cold and moisture crept quietly into bodies, just as they crept into stone walls and wooden beams. He adjusted his habits without thinking much about it. He added warming herbs to his mixtures. He advised thicker clothing, more soups, less raw food. He suggested walking during the warmest part of the day rather than early morning. These changes were small, but small things mattered. One morning, a young apprentice asked him how he remembered so much. The doctor smiled faintly. He did not remember everything. He remembered patterns. He remembered how similar complaints returned with the seasons, how the body echoed the world around it. Memory, he explained, was not about holding facts tightly, but about letting experience settle slowly. The apprentice watched closely as the doctor examined a man with persistent headaches. The doctor asked about the man's work, his posture, his worries. He asked about light and noise. He touched the temples gently, then stepped back and considered. He did not reach immediately for a remedy. Thinking was part of treatment. He suggested rest for the eyes, less wine, more sleep, gentle head massages with warm oil. Simple advice offered calmly. The apprentice noted how relieved the man looked, even before doing any of it. Being heard was medicine too. As the days shortened, candles burned longer in the doctor's home. He conserved them carefully. Light was precious. He read less at night now, resting his eyes, trusting what he already knew. Too much strain upset balance. In the late afternoons, he visited the hospital more often. Cold weather brought more illness. He moved between beds slowly, speaking quietly, checking pulses, observing skin color, listening to breathing. He did not hurry, even when there were many patients. Haste led to mistakes, and mistakes weighed heavily on the mind. He paid attention to smells, sweet, sour, foul. Smell carried warnings. He noted which wounds healed cleanly and which lingered. He adjusted ointments accordingly. Experience refined judgment more than any book. At home, he spent evenings preparing for winter. Drying herbs, sealing jars, sharpening blades. Preparation eased worry. Worry disturbed sleep. Sleep preserved health. Everything connected. Sometimes travelers came through the city, bringing new ideas. One spoke of treatments learned far away, of different theories, different balances. The doctor listened politely. He did not dismiss them, but he did not abandon his foundation. Change, if it came, had to come slowly. Sudden shifts unsettled both mind and body. He tried one new herb cautiously, first on himself, then on willing patients. He observed carefully. When it seemed helpful, he added it quietly to his practice. When it did not, he let it go without regret. Not everything needed to be kept. Winter arrived fully, bringing snow that softened sound and slowed movement. The city felt quieter, heavier. People stayed indoors more. Illness clustered. The doctor's days grew longer, but his pace did not change. He wore thicker cloaks, warmed his hands over small fires, drank hot infusions. He treated frostbitten fingers, lingering coughs, fevers that flared and faded. He advised patients repeatedly. Healing took longer in cold months. Bodies conserved energy, nature rested, and humans followed. Some nights, he returned home deeply tired, yet still careful. He washed his hands even when his fingers ached. He cleaned tools even when his eyes wanted to close. Ritual anchored him. Without it, days blurred too much. He slept more deeply in winter, dreams heavier, slower. He dreamed of long halls filled with quiet breathing, of herbs growing under snow, of scales perfectly balanced despite the weight of years. He woke feeling calm, even when his body protested. Spring eventually returned, as it always did. With it came new life, new ailments, renewed movement. The doctor welcomed the change. Spring loosened stiffness, lifted spirits. He adjusted again, lighter foods, cleansing remedies, more time outdoors. He watched apprentices grow more confident, saw patients return healthier, observed children grow taller. Time moved through him, not past him. He was part of it. And still each day looked much the same from the outside. A man with a bag. Slow steps through narrow streets. Quiet voices, gentle hands, advice given without urgency. This was what medieval doctors did all day. They attended to the ordinary. They worked within limits. They respected rhythm. They filled time not with haste, but with care. As another evening settled, the doctor lay down once more, the familiar weight of the day easing into rest. The city quieted, candles dimmed. Somewhere, a bell marked an hour approximately, imperfectly. And in that imperfect world, the doctor slept trusting that tomorrow would come, gently, just as today had, carrying with it more listening, more walking, more balancing, and the same quiet commitment to tending life slowly, one measured breath at a time. The rhythm held. Night passed without ceremony, and dawn returned the way it always did, quietly, almost apologetically, as if not to disturb those still dreaming. The doctor woke before the light fully reached his room, his body attuned to that narrow moment between darkness and day. He did not rise at once. He listened first. To his breath, to the distant sound of a cart, to the soft settling of the house around him. Age had taught him that waking was not a single act, but a gradual one. The mind woke before the body. The body followed when it was ready. When he stood, he moved slowly, carefully, letting weight settle evenly through his feet. He wrapped himself in his robe, familiar and worn, and crossed the room to wash. The water was cold. It always was. He welcomed the shock. It reminded him that sensation meant life. He dried his hands and paused, fingertips resting on the edge of the basin. For a moment, he felt the faint ache in his joints, the dull stiffness that came each morning now. He did not resent it. It was simply another sign to observe. Outside, the street was damp with early mist. He stepped into it with measured confidence, the stones uneven beneath his solace. He knew where they dipped, where they rose. He had walked this path so many times that his feet remembered, even when his eyes were tired. A familiar face called out to him, a woman whose husband had been ill for weeks. She wanted to report improvement, less coughing, better sleep. The doctor listened, nodded, and offered reassurance. Improvement, even slow improvement, mattered. He did not claim credit. He simply acknowledged the body's effort. His first visit took him to a small workshop where a craftsman complained of numb fingers. The doctor examined his hands, noticed the way he worked, the cold stone he touched all day. He advised warmth, breaks, rubbing the hands with oil infused with rosemary. Simple things, often enough. As the sun rose higher, light filtered into the streets, revealing colors muted by time, stone gray, wood brown, cloth faded by years of washing. The doctor moved through it all as part of the scene, neither hurried nor idle. Late in the morning, he sat with a patient who spoke more of fear than pain. The doctor did not interrupt. He listened until the words slowed on their own. Then he spoke gently about balance, about rest, about how the mind could pull the body out of harmony if left unattended. He suggested walks, simple tasks, regular meals. Structure calmed more than medicine sometimes. At midday, he ate quietly again, his meal unchanged from many days before. He believed the body liked predictability. Sudden changes unsettled digestion. He chewed slowly, breathed deeply, allowed the moment to pass without filling it with thought. The afternoon brought small procedures. Cleaning a wound. reapplying bandages, checking on a fever that had not worsened. He found comfort in stability. When nothing had changed, it often meant things were going well. Between visits, he stopped briefly near the river, watching the water move steadily past. He liked rivers. They reminded him that movement did not require haste. Water traveled far without rushing. As evening approached, shadows stretched longer across the streets. The doctor felt the gentle pull of tiredness. Not exhaustion, just the natural ebb of energy. He welcomed it. At home, he performed the same careful rituals. Washing, cleaning tools, preparing what could be prepared. He laid out herbs to dry, turning them once, then leaving them alone. Too much handling damaged them. The same was true of people. He ate his evening meal, light and warm. He avoided strong flavors at night. He wanted sleep to come easily, without disturbance. Before bed, he sat quietly, hands resting in his lap, eyes half closed. He did not read tonight. He had read enough in his life. Instead, he let the day replay softly in his mind, not judging, not correcting, simply noticing. This reflection was part of his practice. It kept regret from hardening. When he lay down, sleep arrived like a familiar guest. Thoughts slowed. The edges of the day blurred. His breathing deepened. And in that sleep, the pattern continued, not just for him, but for all who practiced medicine in that time. Days filled with walking, listening, touching, advising. Nights filled with rest, dreams, quiet acceptance. This was the shape of their lives. Not dramatic. Not heroic in the way stories often demand. But steady, repetitive, human. And as another night held the city in stillness, the doctor slept again. Secure in the knowledge that tomorrow would unfold in the same gentle way. A slow beginning, careful work, quiet endings. A life spent not conquering illness, but accompanying it patiently, one calm day after another. The sameness deepened, and with it came a comfort that only long familiarity can bring. The doctor no longer measured his life in years, but in sensations, the way the air felt before rain, the smell of illness before fever showed itself, the subtle change in a patient's voice when strength began to return. These things could not be written in books. They lived only in attention. Another morning unfolded gently. The light arrived thinner now, filtered through cloud, pale and unassertive. The doctor woke slowly, his dreams fading like mist. He lay still, allowing the boundary between sleep and waking to soften rather than snap. He believed that sudden waking startled the spirit, and a startled spirit unsettled the body. When he finally rose, he felt the familiar weight in his limbs. Not pain, not weakness, simply the presence of time. He accepted it without complaint. Resistance created tension. Tension created imbalance. He washed, dressed, and prepared himself as he always did. The repetition no longer felt like effort. It felt like belonging. These small acts tied him to every doctor who had come before him and everyone who would follow. Outside, the street was quiet, fewer voices than in warmer months. Footsteps sounded softer. Even the city seemed to move more carefully. The doctor adjusted his pace to match it. He believed that moving against the rhythm of the world invited strain. His first call that day came from a household grieving a recent loss. There was no illness to treat now, only heaviness. The doctor sat with them, speaking little. He offered warm drinks, advised rest, reminded them gently to eat even when appetite was gone. Grief was not a disease, but it affected the body deeply. He treated it with presence. Later, he visited a man whose cough lingered, despite all efforts. The doctor listened to his chest, noted the sound, the depth, the effort it took. He adjusted the man's sleeping position, advised steam inhalation with herbs, patience, warmth. He did not promise recovery. Promises disturbed balance. Hope needed room to breathe. As the day moved on, he felt the slow passage of time not as pressure, but as flow. There was always enough time to listen if one did not rush. There was always enough energy if one did not waste it on urgency. At midday, he rested again, his meal simple, familiar. He watched birds settle on rooftops, observed how they fluffed their feathers against the cold. Nature modeled care without excess. He took note. The afternoon brought fewer visits. Cold days often did. People conserved their strength. The doctor used the quiet hours to organize his space, to review his supplies, to sit with his thoughts. Stillness was not empty. It was full of preparation. He reflected on the years he had practiced. How little had changed, and yet how much he had learned. He knew now when to act and when to wait. Waiting was a skill that took decades to master. As evening approached, he felt a deep calm settle over him, the kind that came not from rest alone, but from alignment. His life fit itself. There were no sharp edges left. He returned home earlier than usual, lit a candle and sat quietly. The flame flickered gently, steady despite small drafts. He watched it, breathing slowly, letting his thoughts drift without attachment. The body followed the breath. The breath followed the flame. When he lay down, sleep took him easily. Dreams came softly, familiar streets, gentle voices, hands reaching out and then letting go. No urgency, no fear, only motion and rest in equal measure. And so the medieval doctor's days continued, indistinguishable yet meaningful, ordinary yet full. From the outside, one might see only a man walking with a bag. From within, there was a lifetime of listening. This was what filled their days. Not constant action but careful presence. Not certainty but observation. Not speed but steadiness. And as the night wrapped itself around the city once more, the doctor slept the world breathing slowly alongside him, both resting in the shared, understanding that tomorrow would arrive quietly and with it another day to move gently through time. The quiet carried on, unbroken, like a long exhale that never quite ended. The doctor slept deeply that night, his dreams loose and unremarkable. The kind that leave no sharp images behind, only a sense of having drifted somewhere calm and familiar. When he woke, he did so without surprise, as if waking were simply another slow turn of the same wheel. Morning returned again, pale and patient. The doctor opened his eyes and remained still, listening to the faint sounds of the house, wood settling, wind brushing against the walls, the distant murmur of life beginning somewhere beyond his door. He rested one hand on his chest and felt his breath. Even, reliable. He took comfort in that. He rose carefully, the floor cool beneath his feet, and went through his familiar preparations. Each motion was practiced, requiring no thought. He washed, he dressed, he gathered himself. These rituals did not feel repetitive to him. They felt anchoring. Without them, the day would drift too easily. When he stepped outside, the air was heavy with dampness. A light rain had fallen during the night, and the stones glistened softly. He adjusted his cloak and walked more slowly than usual, mindful of slick ground. Awareness extended to every step. The body remembered what the mind sometimes forgot. His first visit was nearby. A child had been restless through the night, crying without clear cause. The doctor entered the small home quietly, speaking in a low voice, as if the illness itself might be listening. He examined the child gently, feeling the warmth of the skin, listening to the breathing, watching the way the child clutched at the blanket. He asked the mother about food, about sleep, about changes in routine. Often, illness hid in disruption. He suggested a warm bath, calming herbs, keeping the child close through the night. He did not reach for strong remedies. Not every imbalance needed force. As he left, the rain began again, light and steady. He welcomed it. Rain softened the world. It slowed people down. Slowness, he believed, protected health. The rest of the morning unfolded quietly. Few patients ventured out in the wet. Those who did moved carefully, gratefully accepting brief consultations and simple advice. The doctor's voice remained calm, his hands warm, his attention unbroken. By midday, he found himself alone more than usual. He used the time to sit by the window, watching rain trace paths down the glass. He sipped a warm drink and allowed his thoughts to wander gently, without direction. Thinking without purpose was a kind of rest. He considered how little of his work involved dramatic moments. There were no sudden cures, no clear victories. Instead, there was continuity, a slow weaving of care into daily life. He had come to value that more than any recognition. In the afternoon, he visited the hospital again. The hall smelled of damp wool and herbs. He walked between the beds, greeting familiar faces. Some patients slept. Some watched him quietly. He adjusted blankets, checked pulses, spoke softly to attendants. Presence mattered, even when nothing changed. One patient asked him how long recovery would take. The doctor answered honestly, he did not know. Bodies moved at their own pace. Forcing them only caused harm. The patient nodded, seeming oddly comforted by the answer. Uncertainty, when shared calmly, lost its sharpness. As evening approached, the rain eased. The city emerged slowly, cautiously. The The doctor felt the day settling into him, not as fatigue, but as weight, a gentle heaviness that signaled completion. At home he repeated his closing rituals. He cleaned his tools not because they were dirty, but because cleaning marked the end of work. He prepared herbs for tomorrow, though he knew tomorrow would likely look much the same. Preparation eased the mind. He ate lightly, savoring warmth more than flavor. He avoided unnecessary conversation. Silence supported rest. Before lying down, he sat for a while in near darkness, candle unlit, letting his eyes adjust. He believed that too much light at night confused the body. Darkness reminded it to slow. When he finally lay down, sleep arrived without effort. His breathing deepened, muscles softened. The world narrowed to warmth and quiet, and so the cycle continued. Days shaped by attention. Nights shaped by rest. A life spent moving gently through time, neither resisting it nor chasing it. This was what medieval doctors did all day and all their lives. They lived within limits. They worked without haste. They trusted repetition. They believed that care, applied steadily, mattered more than brilliance. And as another night wrapped the city in stillness, the doctor slept again, held by the same slow rhythm that had carried him through countless days before, and would carry others long after. A rhythm calm enough to rest within, steady enough to endure, and quiet enough to let sleep come easily, again and again. The night passed as it always did, without announcement, without drama. Somewhere a watchman called the hour, his voice softened by distance, and then even that sound dissolved back into quiet. The doctor slept through it, his body settled into the deep, unbroken rest that came only from days lived without hurry. When morning returned, it did so gently. Light pressed faintly against the edges of the room, not demanding attention, merely suggesting that the world was ready again. The doctor woke slowly, his thoughts unformed, his awareness spreading outward from breath to body to space. He lay still, listening to the steady rhythm of his own breathing, allowing it to guide him fully into waking. He rose in his usual way, unhurried, accepting the stiffness in his knees and shoulders as familiar companions. There was no frustration in the movement, only acknowledgement. Time left its marks quietly, and he met them with the same patience he offered his patients. He washed, feeling the chill of water on his skin, and welcomed the clarity it brought. He dried his hands carefully, folded the cloth, and placed it back where it belonged. Small acts of order steadied the mind. He believed that when the world felt uncertain, order within one's reach mattered even more. Outside, the air was still. The rain of the previous day had settled the dust, and the street smelled clean in its own way. Damp stone, wet wood, faint smoke. The doctor stepped out and closed the door behind him softly. He never let it slam. Loud sounds unsettled the body, he believed, and unsettled bodies healed poorly. His path took him first to a familiar home. An elderly man there had been weakening slowly over weeks. The doctor entered quietly, greeted the household, and sat by the bedside. He did not begin with questions. He watched. The rise and fall of the chest, the color of the skin, the way the man's eyes followed movement in the room. When he did speak, his voice was low and steady. He asked about comfort, about pain, about sleep. He adjusted pillows, suggested warm drinks in small amounts, advised keeping the room calm and well-aired. He knew that recovery was uncertain. His role now was to reduce strain, to preserve dignity. He stayed longer than usual, not because there was more to do, but because presence itself was useful. When he finally left, he did so gently, without finality. He would return. Or he would not. Either way, care had been given. The rest of the morning unfolded slowly. A woman with aching joints worsened by damp weather. A young man anxious about a persistent rash. The doctor treated each with the same calm seriousness, explaining gently, recommending simple measures, never overwhelming. Too much instruction confused more than it helped. At midday, he paused as always. His meal was warm and plain. He ate with care, chewing slowly, breathing evenly. He noticed how warmth spread through his body and let it. Awareness extended even to digestion. The body worked best when acknowledged. The afternoon was quiet. Fewer knocks at his door, fewer calls for urgent visits. He used the time to sit and prepare remedies, grinding herbs with steady hands, the sound rhythmic and soft. He found the repetition soothing. Each rotation of the pestle felt like a continuation of something ancient, something shared across generations. As the light shifted toward evening, he tidied his space. he placed tools back in their familiar order. He swept the floor slowly. Cleanliness was not only practical, it was symbolic. Clearing space cleared thought. He sat for a while near the window, watching the sky dim. The transition from day to night was his favorite time. It reminded him that endings did not need to be abrupt. They could arrive gradually, with grace. When darkness finally settled, he lit a candle briefly, then extinguished it before sleep. He preferred the room dim. Darkness invited rest. Rest invited balance. He lay down and allowed the day to release its hold on him. Thoughts drifted past without catching. The rhythm of his breathing deepened. The world narrowed to warmth and stillness. And so the pattern held as it always had. Days marked by listening. Evenings shaped by preparation. Nights filled with quiet rest. This was the full shape of a medieval Dr. S life, not measured by moments of triumph, but by steadiness, by attention, by the willingness to meet each day exactly as it came. The city slept again. The doctor slept with it. And in that shared stillness, time moved forward gently, carrying with it another ordinary tomorrow, ready to unfold in the same calm, unhurried way. The stillness lingered, unbroken and patient, like a pause that had no need to end. The doctor slept on, his body resting in the deep familiarity of nights that asked nothing of him except surrender. When he woke again, it was without sharpness, without the feeling of being pulled from somewhere else. Waking was simply the next gentle step. Light had already found its way into the room, thin and gray, resting quietly on the walls. The doctor lay still for a while, letting awareness return slowly. He noticed the warmth beneath his blanket, the steady beat of his heart, the ease of his breathing. These small confirmations reassured him more than any words could. He rose, careful and deliberate, and stood for a moment before moving. Balance mattered, even now. He wrapped himself in his robe, the fabric worn soft by years of use, and crossed the room to wash. The water felt colder today, or perhaps his hands were more sensitive. He did not analyze it too much. Observation did not always require explanation. Outside, the city stirred quietly. The sound of distant footsteps, the low murmur of voices beginning their day, the soft clatter of wood and stone being set into motion again. The doctor stepped into this awakening world without haste, letting the door close behind him with a muted sound. His first visit that morning was not far. A neighbor had sent word of dizziness and weakness. The doctor entered the small home, nodded in greeting, and sat near the patient without immediately reaching for his bag. He watched first, the way the patient sat, the way their eyes moved, the way their hands rested in their lap. He asked simple questions, spaced out by pauses. Too many questions crowded the mind. He listened to the answers carefully, not just to the words, but to the effort behind them. He concluded that the patient had been eating little, sleeping poorly, worrying much. No mystery illness. Just a body stretched thin. He advised rest, nourishing food, warmth, fewer worries if possible. He knew worries could not simply be set aside, but naming them helped. Being acknowledged lightened them slightly. He left behind a small mixture of herbs, more symbolic than powerful, but symbols mattered. As the morning progressed, the doctor moved from home to home, street to street, his steps steady, his presence familiar. People greeted him with nods and quiet respect. He belonged to the fabric of the place, as expected as the walls and roads. At midday he stopped as always. He ate without distraction, letting the act itself fill the moment. He noticed how hunger faded, how warmth settled. He believed that paying attention honored the body's work. The afternoon brought a visit to the edge of the city, where the air smelled different, open and less confined. A patient there struggled with lingering fatigue after illness. The doctor examined them gently, then spoke about recovery as a process, not an event. He explained that strength returns slowly, like daylight after dawn. The patient listened, reassured by the lack of urgency. As the sun lowered, the doctor began to feel the day's weight again, not unpleasant, simply present. He welcomed it as a sign that he had used his time well. He returned home, performed his evening rituals, and prepared for rest. He sat quietly before lying down, hands resting loosely, eyes half closed. He did not review the day in detail. He trusted that what needed to be remembered would remain. The rest could fade. When sleep came, it did so smoothly, carrying him into the same calm depth as the nights before. Breath slowed. Muscles softened. Thought dissolved. And so the days continued, one after another, each shaped by the same gentle principles: observe, listen, balance, wait. This was what medieval doctors did all day, and all their lives. They lived within the slow turning of time, attending to bodies as they aged, healed, weakened, and rested. The world turned quietly beneath the stars. The city slept. The doctor slept too, held by the same patient rhythm that had guided him through countless days, and would guide many more, as long as there were mornings to wake into and nights to rest within. The rhythm did not change, and that was its quiet strength. Another night eased itself into morning, and the doctor drifted upward from sleep as if rising through calm water. There was no clear edge between dreaming and waking, only a gradual lightening, a soft awareness returning to the shape of the room and the steady presence of his own body. He remained still for a time, letting the day come to him, rather than reaching for it. He listened to the distant sounds of life beginning again. A door opening somewhere, a faint voice, the muted call of a bird. These sounds did not demand action. They simply confirmed continuity. When he finally rose, he did so with care, letting his feet find the floor slowly. The familiar stiffness greeted him, and he greeted it back with patience. He had learned long ago that resistance only sharpened discomfort, acceptance softened it. He washed, dressed, and gathered himself as he always did. Each motion carried the comfort of repetition. Nothing needed to be decided. Decision-making consumed energy better saved for listening. Outside, the morning felt calm and cool. The sky was pale, undecided. The doctor stepped into the street, adjusting his pace instinctively. He did not walk quickly, nor slowly. He walked as the day seemed to require. His first visit took him to a home where a young woman was recovering from illness. He had seen her several times already. Today, he noticed small improvements: clearer eyes, steadier breathing, a little more color in her face. He pointed these out gently, knowing that noticing progress encouraged the body to continue. Healing was partly belief. He advised her to continue resting, to avoid strain, to trust the slow return of strength. He reminded her that recovery did not move in straight lines. Some days felt better, some worse. This was normal. The reassurance settled her more than any remedy. As he left, the sun lifted slightly higher, warming the stones beneath his feet. He felt it through the soles of his shoes and adjusted his cloak. The body responded before thought. The rest of the morning passed quietly. A man with stomach discomfort likely caused by irregular meals. A child with a scrape that needed cleaning more than concern. The doctor treated each with the same measured attention, never exaggerating, never dismissing. Proportion mattered. At midday he paused again. The act of stopping was as deliberate as any treatment. He ate slowly, breathing deeply, allowing the warmth of food to spread. He did not fill the silence with thought. Silence had its own nourishment. In the afternoon, he found himself with little to do. He welcomed it. Not every hour needed to be full. He sat near the window, watching light move across the floor. He noticed dust drifting lazily in the air, untroubled by purpose. The world, he believed, healed itself when allowed. Later, a knock came. A worried father, a child with a fever beginning. The doctor followed him, examined the child, asked questions, assessed warmth and restlessness. He advised cool drinks, light coverings, watchfulness. He reminded the parents not to panic. Panic heated the room more than any fire. As evening approached, the doctor returned home feeling the familiar gentle tiredness. He cleaned his tools carefully, though they had not been heavily used. Cleaning was a way of closing the day, of signaling to the body that work was finished. He ate lightly, warmed his hands briefly near a small flame, then extinguished it. He preferred the quiet dark. Darkness told the body what to do without instruction. Before lying down, he sat for a moment longer than usual, feeling the day settle. He noticed the steady rhythm of his breath, the weight of his hands resting loosely, the calm presence of fatigue that asked only for rest. Sleep came easily. It always did when days were lived without strain. His thoughts softened, then dissolved entirely. And so the cycle continued, not just for him, but for all those who practiced medicine in that time. Days shaped by attention rather than urgency. Lives spent accompanying the slow movements of health and illness alike. This was the true work of medieval doctors. Not endless intervention, but steady witnessing. Not control, but care. Not haste, but patience. The city slept again, wrapped in darkness and quiet. The doctor slept within it, breathing in time with the world around him, knowing, without needing to think it, that morning would come gently once more, and with it, another calm day to move through, slowly, attentively, and at peace. The night settled deeper than ever, thick and soft, muffling even the faintest stirrings of the city. The doctor slept soundly, carried by the same rhythm he had trusted for decades. A rhythm slow, unbroken, steady. Time felt pliable, folding inward and outward at once, measured not by hours but by breaths, by the quiet alignment of body and mind. When morning came, it did so imperceptibly. Light crept in through the small window, diffused by clouds and mist. The doctor felt it first as warmth on his eyelids, then as a subtle shift in the air. He did not rise immediately. He lay for several moments, listening to the house, the slight creak of timber, the whisper of wind, the faint echo of distant life. These were not noises to be ignored, but signs that the world continued its slow turning. He rose carefully, letting the floor meet his feet gradually. Stiffness was familiar. It had become part of his own rhythm. He did not resist it. Resistance, he knew, only created tension. Instead, he accepted each movement as necessary, deliberate, measured. He washed, feeling the cold water awaken his senses and sharpen awareness. Each action, drying, dressing, gathering his tools, was deliberate. Repetition was not monotony. It was the backbone of balance. Stepping into the street, he noticed the faint smell of wet stone and softened earth. The city moved slowly in the early hours. A cart creaked past, a dog barked somewhere distant, the murmur of voices began to rise softly. He walked in step with the rhythm, neither ahead nor behind, simply moving as the day required. His first patient that day was a woman troubled by persistent fatigue. He observed her before speaking, noting the way she carried herself, the way her hands rested, the subtle tension in her shoulders. He asked gentle questions, allowing pauses between them. Silence, he believed, often revealed more than hurried conversation. He recommended small measures: warmth, nourishing foods, regular rest. No dramatic potions, no sudden intervention. The body, he knew, required time, patience, and attentiveness. His instructions were like soft threads, guiding the body toward its own balance rather than forcing it. The morning passed in a similar manner. A man with digestive complaints, a child with a minor scrape, a young mother worried about sleep. Each received the same steady attention, the same calm presence. The doctor did not rush. He did not need to. Time was ample, and his care was deliberate. At midday, he rested. He ate slowly, breathing evenly, noticing warmth spreading through his body. The act of eating was meditative. He allowed the stillness to fill him, letting thoughts drift gently without clinging to them. In the afternoon, a knock came at his door. A family requested help for a child showing early signs of fever. He followed them, observing the child carefully, asking about recent behavior, appetite, sleep, and temperature. He offered simple remedies: light coverings, cool drinks, and rest. He reminded the parents to remain calm. Panic, he knew, could inflame both child and household. As evening approached, he returned home. He cleaned his instruments with care, arranged herbs, and set aside remedies for the next day. Preparation was as much a part of healing as treatment itself. Organization eased worry, and worry hindered balance. He ate his evening meal quietly, warmed his hands by the small fire, and then extinguished the flame. Darkness was gentle, restorative. Before lying down, he sat silently, hands resting lightly in his lap, allowing the day to settle completely. Sleep arrived with no effort. Thoughts slowed, then softened, then disappeared entirely. His breath deepened. Muscles relaxed. Awareness melted into calm. And so the days continued, each one unfolding quietly into the next. The doctor walked the same streets, observed the same rhythms, offered the same careful presence. He knew that his work was not measured in heroic feats or miraculous cures, but in steadiness, attention, and the gentle tending of life's fragile balance. The city slept under the night once more, and the doctor slept within it. Time moved slowly, carrying all things forward with quiet patience. And when the morning returned, as it always did, he would rise again, calm, attentive, steady, ready to meet another day in the soft, enduring rhythm of a medieval life devoted to care. The cycle carried on, unchanging in its pattern, yet endlessly renewing. The doctor woke once more with the soft pull of dawn, not startled, not hurried, but guided by the quiet constancy of the world around him. The city breathed slowly, the streets held their gentle rhythm, and the stone walls of his home absorbed the pale light without complaint. He rose carefully, stretched limbs grown accustomed to age, and performed his morning rituals with the calm precision of decades of practice. Each motion was deliberate, each pause measured. The body required attention, but the mind required patience. Both were served in equal measure. The day unfolded as it had countless times before. He walked familiar streets, visited patients, listened without haste, observed without judgment. He cleaned wounds, brewed herbal remedies, offered gentle counsel, and reassured anxious minds. He reminded each patient, and perhaps himself, that healing was not always sudden, not always visible, but always ongoing. By midday, he rested, nourishing himself with modest food, allowing the warmth to spread through his body. He noticed the quiet changes in the world outside, the tilt of sunlight, the flutter of birds, the scent of wet earth after rain. Life, even in its ordinary passage, provided lessons in balance and continuity. Afternoon brought more visits, more care given in subtle ways. A father worried about a cough, an elder burdened with fatigue, a child restless and anxious. Each received the same measured attention. The doctor moved not as one chasing time, but as one moving with it, matching the tempo of the day and the pace of recovery. As evening fell, he returned home. He cleaned his tools carefully, prepared herbs for tomorrow, and set aside his notes. Ritual marked closure. The day's work, though largely ordinary, had been completed fully, without hurry, without neglect. He ate lightly, warmed himself briefly, then extinguished the candle. Darkness invited rest, silence invited reflection. He sat for a few moments, hands resting lightly, thoughts soft and unbound. He allowed the day to dissolve entirely, leaving only the calm continuity of existence. When he lay down to sleep, it came swiftly, deeply, gently. Breath and heartbeat matched the slow rhythm of the world outside. Muscles softened. Mind quieted. Presence, long cultivated, carried him into rest without interruption. And in that quiet, the truth of the medieval doctor's life became clear. It was not measured in heroic gestures or dramatic cures, but in the patient, steady tending of life. It was found in walking the streets, listening carefully, observing minutely, and offering care without expectation. It was in honoring the rhythm of the body and the pace of the world. The city slept. The doctor slept. And the world moved quietly onward, carrying with it the gentle legacy of a life spent in attention, in care, and in steady presence. This was what medieval doctors did all day. Not miracles, not fame. Only the slow, enduring work of tending life, day after day, year after year, until the rhythm itself became the cure, a life concluded not with noise or triumph, but with calm, steady continuity. The end.